Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to our 1111 Tech Takes Live in the Console series. Today's session is all about cloud storage. We've got a great session for you. We're going to begin with why storage is a challenge in modern IT. We're going to talk about why cloud storage isn't all the same. We'll talk a little bit about 1111's cloud storage offering, and of course, as part of our Tech Take series, show you a demonstration of the 1111 console and how it relates to, amongst other things, cloud storage as well. With that in mind, let's go ahead and begin with our topic on modern storage challenges. Typically, when I talk to customers, partners, or just anyone in the IT space, one of the biggest challenges they have is the astronomical growth that they have when it comes to storage, and really figuring out how to account for that storage, where to keep it, and how to make it all work from a budgeting perspective. Well, certainly when we think about where cloud storage or object storage fits into that approach, you, like a lot of other organizations, have probably taken a look at it for many different use cases. When you look at the statistics out there, with growth comes a real hindrance to organizations how they're going to keep long-term retention of some things that may be compliance required or key valuable data for their organization, but how they're going to do so cost effectively. And a lot of organizations have looked at it for just that, backup long-term retention, but certainly also leverage things related to web or test dev, making storage more accessible and easier to manage in addition to the cost savings. And when you think about who's using cloud storage out there, there's a lot of organizations like yours that have either investigated it or are actively using it in some way, shape, or form. And often when people are surveyed around why do they use cloud storage, it typically comes down, amongst other things, the compatibility, the lack of complexity, how easy to integrate it is. But some of the top reasons why is the goal around having low cost or optimizing their spend, and the security or making sure that the data that they keep is resilient. Maybe one of those stands out to you in particular, but either way, when you think about how cloud storage can be used, the use cases are truly numerous. And just to expand on that a little bit more detail for you, some of the ways that we've seen organizations that work with us in our cloud storage, which we'll talk more about in a moment, are related to things like perhaps unstructured data. Now, depending on where you are with your technical journey, that may sound like a familiar term and it may not, but really the idea behind unstructured data is if I have things that are like media content or rich materials for customers that they need to access, but probably don't need to be changed all the time, object storage has proven itself as a really great approach to having long-term retention, easily accessible, and very cost-effective at the end of the day. We talked about before, but certainly backup and archive are a really popular approach for cloud storage, and often because you may be required or feel obligated as an organization due to policy to keep data for months or even years, or in some industries indefinitely. And being able to do that in a cost-effective way is pretty critical and pretty complex with more traditional storage mechanisms. And even some of the things out there, maybe you as an organization have done tape or other options in the past that are extremely cost effective, but often are very difficult to get the data back from. You're getting a cold price, but you're getting a very cold restore time, which can go into hours or days, if not longer, depending on how you do things. One of the great things about cloud storage is a target for things like backup and archive is it traditionally will provide a good balance. And what that balance is I can keep things long term for a cost effective price point, but should and when I need to have access to it, I can get back in a much quicker. Typically, you're talking more in terms of minutes to hours, not hours to days to weeks, depending on the storage mechanism. So that's why it's so popular for backup and archive purposes. And then last but not least, there's this concept of cloud tiering. Again, depending on where you work in IT or how you've approached things, you may or may not be familiar with this term, but cloud tiering is all about being more efficient with how you use your production or tier 2 storage in your environment. A lot of vendors, and the list continues to grow, are offering capabilities to say, hey, if data hasn't been accessed in a long time or after it's sat on an appliance for a certain period, move this data to cloud storage, be able to bring it back as needed, but free up the space for more active production data. And that really goes back, if we think of why people use cloud storage, into our cost, category there. Being able to move from a more expensive tier of stores to a lower cost one is critical, but being able to access and pull that back is equally critical as well. So why don't we explore a little bit of some of the approaches people have taken when it comes to cloud storage and where they often run into some challenges along the way. So if we dig into this with a little bit more detail here, obviously, if organizations are looking at cloud storage predominantly because of things like pricing or security, you would hope they can deliver all that. But what we find time and time again, and I'll expand on a couple of these key categories for you in just a moment, is organizations that struggle with cloud storage often find that predictable pricing is harder to find than maybe they once thought. Again, I'll walk you through this in a moment, which is a shame because that's often the number one reason why they're looking at cloud storage in the first place. If you think back to the other motivations, hey, if for compliance I'm required to keep data for years, you better make sure that that object storage you leverage is highly resilient and highly durable. The data has to be there for when you need it, right? And this is a big priority for a lot of organizations. Again, we'll explore in just a moment of where often people find limitations or shortages on this. Really critical for you to understand and navigate around that if that's a big priority. And then amongst other things that typically I hear from partners and customers around what's critical on object storage is, hey, one of the great things about cloud storage is I can get the data closer to the customer and I can serve a global audience. So I might want true global reach. Or, hey, by putting the data in the cloud, I can leverage the best practices and the capabilities of the cloud provider to better help secure the access to my data or provide a platform of security. People also are, ideally saying, hey, I can move away from having to do a lot of capital expenditures of on-prem storage and move more towards an operational model in which I pay for what I need. And last but not least, and it always depends on the organization, they may find value in getting access to expertise or services that they don't have in-house that relate directly to cloud storages or expand what cloud storage can do for them. So you may look at this list and identify a couple that you would find critical along the way. Traditionally speaking, the top things that I hear from partners and customers is the pricing and the durability are some of their top priorities, but unfortunately also where a lot of people fall short. So let's explore that just a little bit more for you. When it comes to the pricing model side, what I'd love to explore a little bit more, what can go wrong with that? So I'm dating myself a bit here, but when I think about cloud storage and what can go wrong, I often think back to kind of the early cell phone plans. Maybe you're familiar with this depending on, when you first started using cellular devices. But when cellular devices first started becoming popular, a lot of plans had a monthly fee and then you would pay per text, per gig browsed if you had web access, per call. I legitimately remember with the birth of my first child, having to wait till after 7 p.m. at night to talk to people because I'd used all my minutes for the month and I didn't want to pay extra. Unfortunately, for a lot of organizations to look at cloud storage, they're not familiar that some organizations price their cloud storage in a way that's a lot more similar to the old cell phone plan than you might think. And what happens to them is they see a fixed cost or a starting point cost, but what they don't realize is often in addition to the storage costs, they pay for how they use the storage. And depending on what you do in technology, you may be familiar with things like puts, gets, lists, and other things like that. But really just think of this as every time you use your cloud storage, you're paying something. It's kind of like that old cell phone plan with every text, every call, it adds to your bill. Now, it can vary a lot, right, as to what that cost means for an organization. But long story short, analysts out there often say that this can easily add another 20 to 40% for organizations on top of their bill. That's not ideal, especially when you think of one of the top reasons why people use cloud storage is because they think it's going to help them save money and be more spend efficient. 1111 is very strong on this. I'll expand on this for you in just a moment. But with 1111, our approach to cloud storage is having an all-inclusive design. A low per terabyte price point, but not charging separately for all of the usage of the storage. And if you're using object storage for things like backup or media files, you'll be surprised at how much you actually use that storage and how much that price can vary with other providers out there. Now, if we think back to the chart a moment ago and think about the top reasons why people want to have object storage and some of their concerns, we talked about resilience and durability. Again, if you're going to put data out in the cloud and you're going to need to keep it there for years, it needs to be really reliable. It needs to be really resilient. Or if your compliance requires 2, 3, or 6 years, depending on if you're in healthcare, or finance, or other industries, if you lose that data, that could be a large impact for your organization. And not all cloud service providers are the same in this regard. Many cloud service providers out there, their base offering only includes one location or one copy of the data, and that can really lend itself to a single point of failure. One thing you certainly want to look at when it comes to object storage is ensuring that when you get it, you're obviously comfortable with the price, but that price point includes the resiliency and durability that you need, especially if your data is compliance or mission critical to your organization for profitability or audits even, right? With 1111, and we'll expand a little bit on this in a moment as well, the way that we sell object storage is at a minimum, that data is written across 3 zones in a region to avoid a single point of failure and have very high levels of data resiliency and availability. When you're keeping data for months or years in the cloud, you better believe that is a critical thing to consider at the end of the day. So we already hinted on this a little bit, and I won't belabor it too much, but what we see time and time again is with the market as a whole, there's often this compromise, for lack of a better word, that has to be done with people when they're selecting their cloud object storage. Do I go with the price point that's going to give me the global availability, that's going to give me multiple locations and copies of the data, that's going to allow me for faster recovery, especially compared to things like tape or cold storage? Or do I try to go with the lower cost, optimized pricing approach, and maybe not have some of those resiliency factors? Because a lot of providers out there that focus specifically on the price point, they unfortunately often have very minimal offerings when it comes to what you get at that intro level price. In many cases, you have to pay extra for extra sites or extra capabilities. With 1111, our really theme and approach to the cloud storage piece is you get premium storage, but you get it without the premium price. This means that with 1111, when you get it from us, there is a fixed cost, but you're getting at least 3 locations, if not more, where that data is written across to make sure that you have resiliency. You're getting global availability, but you're also getting flexible payment options. You're getting fast recovery, and you're getting great compatibility. And that, at the end of the day, means that you're really optimizing your spend and your resilience without compromise. And how we go about doing that is, and just to be very clear, this can vary depending on the market as to what the exact price is, but the consistent piece across the board here is in every market globally, we have the ability to serve our customers with a very compelling price point in terms of what the per terabyte unit price is, but we're able to include a lot of capabilities with it. As mentioned before, we include unlimited data transfer and API requests. Think of this as like having a cell phone plan that has unlimited text, data, and calls, right? To complete that analogy out, we're doing the same on the object storage side. That makes it far more predictable for you to know what your monthly spend is, which is critical. If your goal is to save money, having a variation of up to 40% of your bill is probably not ideal to saving money. So being able to have that predictability is critical. We have phenomenal support on an organization, but also just as importantly, if you've been following these series of console demos, then you know that there's a lot more 11 can do when it comes to being able to provide capabilities for our customers and our partners. And this is an ideal time for us to switch gears just a little bit and take a look at a console demo for you that'll help complete a little bit of those thoughts. So I'll go ahead and drag onto the screen our 1111 Cloud Console, and we'll expand a little bit on the capabilities that 1111 can provide, but more so how working with us, not just on the cloud side, on the backup, disaster recovery side, but how we can also combine this into our object storage piece as well. So what you see on the screen now is an example of the 1111 Cloud Console. Now, to put it simply, the 1111 Cloud Console is designed specifically to save you time, to make the complex far more simple for you. And here's how we do this. With every element of your IT, there are likely things that you do that you have to do multiple logins, multiple tools, multiple systems at the end of the day, and that can make life very complicated. So with our console, our goal is to remove as much friction and as much complication as possible. Case in point, when you leverage us for production hosting like cloud storage and cloud resource, and I'll zoom in just a little bit to make this a little easier to see, instead of you having to have a separate backup tool, separate replication tool, separate monitoring and management tools, we build all that into our console so that you can have a single interface to manage your production guests, to migrate over, maybe due to increased licensing costs and use our platform instead, but have everything at your fingertips from a resiliency, networking, and security perspective to make life better for you and your end users. Well, the same is true with 1111 across multiple services, which can include things like backup, Office 365. And again, if you join us for other sessions, you've likely heard us talk about how critical it is to have multiple copies of your data, or even with things like 365, how there's single points of failure if you leverage Microsoft 365 without any backup details. You're in a world of hurt if emails or files and folders go missing. And that's what our console provides to our customers and partners, is the ability to monitor, manage, and restore things like 365 backups from a single pane of glass. Even on our connectivity side, we provide a streamlined approach to seeing across multiple locations, seeing the health and priority of each location, and allowing for you to dig in deeper to understand what should be serviced and how we can solve that for you. With the object stores for AWS, this is no different. At the end of the day, what we're doing here is providing the ability for our customers to be able to see the stores they have available for them to manage the buckets within the object storage itself, to be able to see billing and understand what their spend looks like in terms of their consumption and where they're expanding and how they're using that storage as well. So long story short, our ability with our object storage to help customers goes well beyond the very critical approach related to solving the spend question. All-inclusive storage at a fixed monthly rate that's at or better than many of the competitors out there is a great way to start your cloud storage journey. Combining that with a high level of resilience and global reach is ideal, but removing the complexity of having more interfaces to manage through our 1111 Cloud Console, in which we can leverage the production hosting, the backups, 365 connectivity, and object storage all in one interface and provide you with the resources you need to manage and maintain your environment is obviously really critical to the success of you and a lot of other organizations out there. So with that in mind, I'll do a quick summary as we wrap up today. But really the idea here, team, is organizations are doing more and more when it comes to their cloud storage management and adoption. And we talked about earlier on that what's driving a lot of that is the security of the environment, wanting to make sure that they, like many other organizations out there, have a strong approach to answering that, will I save money and will my data be there approach. But as we mentioned, there are a lot of headwinds that customers and partners we run into where they don't get the predictability they want and they don't have the resiliency they want, because often everything is charged for in a variable rate, leading to confusion and overspend, or often providers, in order to give a low price, have a single location or single copy of data, leaving customers and partners exposed. With 1111, we're blending really the best of both worlds. We're providing a very predictable price that provides the savings for our customers, but include everything needed to be resilient and have that predictability they need. With that in mind, I'd love to thank you for joining us today. and invite you, if you haven't yet, to join many of our other 1111 Cloud Console conversations and demo sessions where we explore many of the other topics around production hosting, connectivity, and other topics for you as well. With that in mind, and once again, love to thank you for joining today's session. I look forward to seeing you on a one in the future. Take care, everyone.